Good afternoon. My name is Doug Clark, and this is about Win OS2 and OS2 on the big screen. And this is a picture of two 27-inch monitors side by side in front of a 56-inch diagonally measured TV screen. And the two 27-inch monitors are actually slightly wider than the 56-inch screen, which surprised me. They're about twice the height, which makes sense because that's a 4K TV, and the 27-inch monitors, at least when you're running Snap, you're probably running 1920 by 1080, which is about half each one of those of a 4K screen. Which one you want to use depends on, obviously how much desk space you have, what your office is like, things like this. For me, I've always wanted to keep up with the Joneses. I like to look at people's desktop setups. I thought that I wanted a bigger and bigger monitor, and I actually put the 56-inch monitor on my desk and hated it, partly because it blocked the view of everything else, and I like to look out the window and see the outside. But the workflow, I do a lot of programming, and having the vertical size is nice because then you can see more lines of code. On the other hand, if you're doing spreadsheets and you want to see all those columns, then what you want is the width. So what you want is really dependent on what your workflow is and what your desktop space is and things like this. But if you want one big screen, you're talking Panorama. If you want two screens, you're talking Snap. And then this is just a visual of what the different aspect ratios look like. And then below that is the resolutions and what the aspect ratio is of each resolution. So if we look at 3840 by, where is it? 3840 by 1080, right here. So that's a 32:9. What was your screen that you were looking at? That Lenovo that you said 3:1?
Yeah, 3:2 was.
3:2.
I can't remember which Lenovo model it was now.
And 4K is 3840 by 2160.
What about 1920 by 1200?
1920 by 1200 is 16 by 10. The point of this is if your resolution is set at one aspect ratio and you're viewing that on a monitor that doesn't match that aspect ratio, then it's got a couple of choices what it can do. It can either chop off parts of the image. It can either leave black bars on the screen, and if you've got a high definition television and you're running low definition videos on it, then you probably see the black bars that you have there. Or the other thing you can do is...
That's the monitor itself that does that, or TV or whatever it is.
Probably. The other thing it does is it will enlarge, it'll distort it to fit the image that you have, or the screen that you have. And sometimes that can be, depending on how sensitive you are, sometimes that can be disturbing. I bought a 32-inch 4K monitor for this presentation because I didn't have anything that would do 4K, and I needed to test it out. Unless you were abandoned as a baby in the woods and raised by a flock of eagles like Romulus and Remus, no normal person can look at 4K on a 32-inch monitor. It's just too small. So I'm running 1920 by 1400. But that is a different aspect ratio than what the screen was designed for, which is 4K, and so it is distorted, the image that's on there. You can see that in the,
Look, you can really see it.
yeah, yeah, or sometimes it gets like that. So how sensitive you are to that, how much money you want to spend on the screen, what kind of resolutions you're going to run, you need to factor all of that stuff in when you're trying to decide what you want to do.
When you say a 4K screen, is that 3840 by whatever the other number is?
3840 by 2160, which is
Twice 1920 by 1080.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's what 4K is?
Yeah.
Okay.
So what aspect ratio is that? I'm
16
missing.
by 9.
Pardon? 16 by 9?
Yeah, that's
16
a
by 9,
normal
second line.
Okay.
widescreen aspect.
Second line of resolution.
So this is 1600. Here we go. Yeah, 16 by 9. Now, I've read in an article about aspect ratios that 16 by 9 is actually kind of the sweet spot in the middle, that it seems to cause the least amount of distortion for other frequencies or other resolutions that are being broadcast on that. So if you're trying to get something that's going to be least offensive to you, you may want to get a monitor that does 16 by 9 natively.
So your monitor was,
It was 4K, 32-inch,
so it's
16 by 9.
It's 3840 by,
3840 by 2160, which is
yeah.
4K, and obviously they've rounded up because 38
Yeah, so
isn't 4, but you know,
then you chose to display it at half, well, a quarter of that.
because I just couldn't read 4K on it. In fact, I had a very difficult time seeing the mouse pointer as it moved because the text is so small. So the next resolution that was available to me, and we'll get to that in a second, was 1920 by 1440. And that looks pretty good, but it is a bit distorted.
Yeah.
Now, would the other one be not distorted because it's a direct
Yes,
fraction of the natural?
direct fraction of the natural resolution of the monitor. And when you turn your monitors on, if the signal that they're getting isn't at its natural or optimum resolution, a lot of them will tell you that this is what our preferred resolution, or this is what our optimum resolution. You can use them at those other resolutions, but it won't look as good as it would if you were broadcasting it at their designed resolution. So, this I found out just now is not correct, because we're hooked up to this screen, this projector, and it actually, I'll look at it in a second, but we can actually get a higher resolution than that through Snap on VGA, which surprised me. And if you look at the maximum resolution that VGA says it'll do, it's actually quite high. It's like 25 something by, but you almost never find a device that accepts that. So normally, I used to think that Snap was a maximum 3840 by 1200. Panorama goes up to 4K pretty easily, and I believe the limit is actually substantially higher than that. Yeah, really high. I just picked 4K because I thought, well, that's the largest reasonable monitor that most people are going to get to, but internally Snap's, pardon?
That's the largest I've ever seen connected, yeah.
It's 4K.
It's 3840 by 2160.
Oh, 3840, but yeah, so. Now, the limits of what you're actually going to see when you connect your computer up to your monitor are determined by your video BIOS, what the monitor's capable of, and the connection that you have. because some video connections are limited to a maximum size, like DVI. For single link, I believe is 2560 by 1600. And while dual link will go higher than that, you almost never find a real dual link DVI.
Meaning
HD.
you'd have two DVI cables? Is that what that is?
No,
Or is it
it's-
that special connector with two connectors? By it?
DVI is an interesting animal. In a DVI connector, you can have an analog signal, you can have a digital signal, you can have both, and you can have what's called a dual link digital signal that ups the maximum resolution the DVI can transmit. I've seen very few actual monitors that have.
Where you can, like that, I think I had one of those ones where the card had this special DVI connector and you could drive two monitors off it. Like, is that what that is?
Well, no, that can be
No.
something different. We'll look at
Okay.
connecting two
Well,
things
some of them have
to one.
4 pins and then they have 18.
Now, HDMI, I've listed the maximum as 1920 by 1080 for OS2.
Yeah.
If you're connecting a Windows machine to a 4K monitor or TV that's HDMI, you probably will get 4K. But on OS2, just because of the video BIOS that I've seen, I think the maximum that you could probably count on is 1920 by 1080. I mean, you may find a particular video card that you can plug your 4K HDMI monitor into that will actually work.
Yes,
But
did.
pardon?
I did,
Did you?
yeah, the Lenovo M90T
Okay.
computer comes with such a connection.
Pretty impressive.
Yeah.
But I have two 4K monitors I tried this on. Both of them support HDMI 2.1, I think, which is a 4K transmission. Neither one of them would get higher than 1920 by 1080 through Panorama connected to OS2, which is not a Panorama issue specifically, more it's the video BIOS and the card that you're using, your video card, or if you've got an internal graphics processor. UEFI. These are 4 classes of UEFI machines and firmware that I saw listed a couple times on the internet. I think they're useful for just understanding the issues that you have on running a UEFI machine. And I've got to tell you, it's complex. When I first got my first UEFI machine, I spent 2 weeks trying to get that thing to run. And I started thinking, what's wrong with me? Why am I so dumb? Well, genetics. But it turns out that there's a lot of people that are finding UEFI to be complex, difficult to understand, and difficult to implement. So the basic things for our viewpoint is you got a legacy system that doesn't have UEFI on it at all. So that's class 0, which really isn't UEFI. You've got a UEFI system that's only running in CMS mode, or compatibility system module mode. And CSM is a specification supposedly for how UEFI firmware is supposed to emulate legacy BIOS. I read one site, there was a site about how to write bootloaders, and what they said was there's more variation in how UEFI firmware implements CSM mode than there is in actual legacy BIOS variations out in the wild. And you'll see it manifest itself in all sorts of weird ways. Disks that will show up when you boot one way, but won't show up when you boot another way. I have that issue with this. So Class 2 system is one that can launch UEFI applications, which really means boot into UEFI, and it can run in CMS mode, and the CSM mode. And then the third class is a pure UEFI system that just runs UEFI. And if I get this stuff wrong, please speak up and correct me, because I feel like my head is this far above the water on this stuff. Now, Panorama, which is a brilliant little piece of software. Panorama is really an interface between the video BIOS and presentation manager. It runs when you boot into UEFI, it runs if you boot to UEFI with CSM, it runs if you do a legacy boot. For UEFI on Arcanoa systems, Arcanoa supplies the video BIOS. It's really a VISA emulator, but you can think of it as doing the function of what the BIOS would be on a discrete video card if you plugged it in. And it's that determines, along with the video interface, your resolution and your color depth and your performance that you have. And when you're running Panorama with UEFI, you get DOS and you get WinOS2. But from what I've seen, you're stuck with a 16 million color depth, which means you're schlepping a lot of data to the screen. It has some impacts on your performance, and depending on what applications you run in WinOS2, it can also have some impacts on those applications. Make sense so far? When you're running Panorama with CSM, Panorama can, in some instances, patch the video BIOS to match the monitor capabilities. It reads apparently the data that the monitor sends. This is called the enhanced resolution feature of Panorama, and it will try and patch the BIOS so that the BIOS will actually support those. Whether that works or not depends on whether the BIOS actually can do that, because the monitor could report some resolutions and color depths that the BIOS can't actually handle. But this runs in CMS mode. It does not run in UEFI mode. And for this to work, you need certain types of AMD or Intel graphics processors. It doesn't work with NVIDIA, for instance. And can also do some wizardry stuff with with memory that I don't actually understand, but can increase the performance. But the takeaway here is the more colors you have, the deeper your color depth, the more data you're shuffling back and forth, and so the lower your performance is going to be. You want to pick a color depth that is reasonable to you on viewing things, but minimizes the amount of data that goes back and forth. And you only have that option in Panorama when you're running it in CMS mode.
Is that like 1920 by 1080 by 16?
It's by the 16 by the
32.
Yeah, and it's called deep color or real color or technicolor or.
But what's a low one? 16?
16 bits is 64K color, 64,000 colors.
And is that the lowest you can go, or can
Oh,
you?
no, you can go to 16
You
bits.
could set it for 4.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can
Uh,
get deep in color.
Yeah, you could do black and white, which would be 2 colors.
Uh-huh. Oh, okay.
But you probably don't want to do that. And color depth is weird because 64K color is referred to as 16-bit color. It's also referred to as 15-bit color. And real color or deep color is 32 bits or 24 bits, and I don't know why there's that difference. But you can look at what Panorama is doing with the Pano utility, using those parameters, or Panorama creates a log that's that file name there that you can go and look, and it will tell you whether it was able to do the memory fix-ups and what the color depth is and the resolutions that the monitor advertised that it could support, and the video BIOS stuff that it could.
That comes on Arc OS, thank you.
Yes. So here's an example of a UEFI boot with Panorama and no CSM. And this is my 4K monitor. You can tell, not only from the Panorama Visa, but when it lists the card name as being the UEFI Visa emulator, that is Argonoa's built-in part of their compatibility layer, I guess. But you can't select anything other than 16 million colors. This is Panorama with a different, discrete video card. This particular one is a Radeon RX 550, I believe. And this name is AMD's code name for the chip that's on the video card. The other thing I should point out is that the more colors that you have, the more memory it has to allocate for moving the stuff back and forth. And if you have a shadow buffer, you're just doubling that amount of memory that's being set aside for video operations. So if you're concerned about chewing up your memory that might be available for SeaMonkey or Firefox or something else like that, that's another reason to keep it lower. This is just what it looks like with HDMI, and the highest resolution, I don't know if you can read that, is 1920 by 1080. And this is the machine, which is not this one, but another machine, has a VGA port on it, so you had an alternative of connecting up with either DisplayPort or VGA, but the monitor did not. So I was using an adapter that went from VGA to HDMI, but you're still limited by what the HDMI can do for you. Okay. So nowadays, many of the CPUs, both from AMD and Intel, you can get with or without an integrated graphics processor.
On the CPU?
On the chip.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and AMD calls it an API for some reason. Intel calls it an integrated graphics. But what it basically means is the graphics is integrated with the processor. Oftentimes you may find when you're doing comparison between that same CPU with an integrated graphics or without an integrated graphics, that you lose some features for that particular chip when you have the integrated graphics. For example, when I was shopping for my Ryzen 5, a Ryzen 5 5600G had less PCIe lanes, and we'll talk about what that means in a second, available for general consumption when it had the GPI integrated than when it didn't have the GPI integrated. It also had a smaller internal cache on the chip. So if you're considering whether to get a processor with an integrated graphics or to get a discrete graphics, a separate video card, you have to figure out what your needs are and then compare what the chip's features are. Now, Panorama can work with anything. Snap, since the development of Snap basically stopped in, I think, 2006, you're limited to whatever video chips Cytec had developed up to that point in time. So you have a very specific, limited set of chips that it runs on. And I say discrete only on newer stuff, although on older machines like Lewis's T43, that has a graphics chip that runs Snap on it. And that's old enough that it really needs Snap to have decent video performance on it.
Yep.
If you tried to run Panorama on it, you'd be disappointed. But on newer machines, your performance through Panorama is good, very good.
Now, Snap won't actually work on a newer machine?
Oh, yes, it will.
Okay, next slide.
It will work on a newer machine provided you can get the graphics chips that they were compiled for on that new machine.
You mean via like an add-in card or something?
By an add-in card.
But not, like an ATI, like a newer ATI may support the same interface as an older one or not?
Probably not. If you're getting an ATI or AMD made graphics card built after roughly 2006, it's probably not going to be supported by Snap.
Okay.
I mean, there's a chance, but it's probably not.
It's funny, like what's different about a newer graphics chip? Like, how different can it be?
Apparently a lot. And it seemed like ATI and now AMD, because AMD bought ATI in, I think, 2006, it seemed like they were releasing new graphics chips and processors about every 6 months. In fact, I read a review from the time that was complaining that it looked like AMD was releasing stuff that only had a $10 or $15 difference between one version, one card number, and the next card number. It's almost like what's happening with CPUs now. Okay, for Snap, it'll run with DOS and OS2. It'll run on a UEFI system as long as you've got CMS on it. Yes, thank you. CSM. As I said, there are a limited specific set of cards and chips that are running, and those are surprisingly readily available today.
Those like older ATI cards?
Well, those are these.
Uh-huh.
And this is the chips from the README on the wiki, the subset that will support dual monitors. Because the chipsets that will support dual monitors is smaller than the set of chips that will support Snap as a single monitor. And I included the AGP ones just because there may be somebody running a machine that's that old that has an AGP interface. But what you're really interested in are the PCI ones, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, at least 6 different chips, video cards, chipsets for AMD or ATI. And I would recommend AMD or ATI over NVIDIA. My favorite one is this one, the X600. For a number of reasons, it doesn't have a fan. You can get it in a small form factor or a low-rise card. You can get them with I think it's called a DMS59 connector, which is what this looks like. And then you get this dongle that you can connect either two DVIs to it, two VGIs, DVIs, two VGAs, or one of each.
Mhm.
You can actually buy one of these cables with one VGA and one DVI. So it's my preference. I know people that are running X800s or X850s. I've got one at home. The reason I don't like the X800 is because it's a wider card, it has a fan, and it sounds like an airplane taking off on your PC case when it first turns on. After it boots up, it'll slow down and be reasonable, but lordy, while it's booting up. Now, for the Radeon X600, these are two of the part numbers. Comes in 128 megabyte and a 256 megabyte model. You don't need the 256. And I checked last week on the internet, and these are, other than eBay, which you can see a lot of them are, these are reclaimers that all claimed that they had it in stock, other than the bottom one, which claimed that they were selling it, but they didn't specifically say that they had it in stock. So they're readily available. If you buy from eBay, you'll probably pay between $10 to $20 for the card. You may have to pay another $15 for the dongle, depending on whether the card comes or not. If you pay it from one of these resellers or recyclers, you'll pay $150 or so, $250 for the card. But sometimes they provide a warranty and support. So it just depends.
Now, when you use a card like that, this recard with graphics memory, does that mean it takes less memory out of your system memory?
No,
Doesn't.
actually kind of the opposite.
Oh.
And in fact, this machine here has an X600. I don't even remember what the, whether it's a 256 or 128, plugged into a PCIe Generation 3 4X slot. Which brings us to this part. Say you wanted to get one of these, where can you plug it in? And the answer is basically any place it fits. Now, you may not want to plug it in to any of those slots that it fits in, because that can have implications on what kind of resources you're consuming from your motherboard that might otherwise be available for other things. And to understand that, we have to get to a little bit of PCI. PCIe is similar to PCI, especially in the name, but it's not the same thing. It's like the Mustang Mach-E is not the same thing as the Mustang Mach-1. One is a two-door muscle car from 60s and 70s and later. The other is a four-door electric battery SUV. So the name looks familiar, but they're not really the same. They are physically and electrically different from each other. They're running different voltages. The PCIe is a serial bus. PCI is a parallel bus that's shared among every device that's on her. However, the software or the drivers that configure the card run the same. But you cannot fit a PCIe card, sorry, you cannot fit a PCI card into a PCIe slot. But you can buy an adapter. And this is a picture of the PCIe adapter with a PCI card plugged in the top. This is my 8-port serial card. This is a StarTech one, and you can see it has a separate power connector because lots of PCI cards are 5 volts and PCIe is 3.3 volts. But that works. I've got two of those in my main machine, one with this serial port, 8-port serial port plugged into it, and one with an Intel gigabit network card plugged in. And why, you say, would you ever do that? And that's because I'm foolish enough to want to run NetBIOS because I like a Warp server for e-business, and what I found is the Intel cards run much faster than the Realtek network chips. And so the easy way for me to fix that is to spend $50 on an adapter card, plug it in, and then I solve my driver issue. And that's actually could be true for a lot of different hardware that you want to use on modern machines with OS2 is if you have a driver for PCI version, there's a chance it will run in OS2 by getting the adapter. Don't try the other adapters. I tried the other adapters, they don't work. In some instances, you can't even physically plug most PCI cards into them.
You mean the StarTech specifically?
The StarTech specifically works. There's also all sorts of other ones that are sexier and prettier, but I haven't found that they work.
But I guess you cannot close the case.
Pardon?
You cannot close the case of the computer with that.
Well, you can't close this case.
Okay.
So lots of new cases are made for people that run and want to run water cooling. And so they have space for radiators, and lots of times the space that they allocate for that radiators is above where the motherboard is. And so on a lot of cases, you have a lot of actual vertical headroom above the motherboard, and you can fit it in. You'll probably have to craft your own bracket, this, to fit in unless you happen to get it. This particular card came with a half-height bracket that worked perfectly, but the Intel networking card didn't, so I had to do a little tin snipping and bending to get it to work. So PCI. The connection for PCI happens by lanes. Each lane takes 4 wires or conductors or signal traces. And for slots, you have slots of different physical sizes. And the lanes are indicated by an X. So X1 has, in theory, 1 lane, X4, 4 lanes, X8, 8 lanes, and obviously X16, 16 lanes. However, the size, the physical size of the connector on your motherboard may not equal the actual number of lanes that the slot has. Meaning you may have a slot on your motherboard that will physically fit a X16 card, but is only wired for X4 or X8. And there's reasons for that. That's because you can plug any size card into any size slot on a PCI motherboard and it will work. You can also plug a card of any generation PCIe into a slot of any generation and it will work. But you have to be able to physically fit it. And so the 2 ways that they have of allowing you to plug larger cards into smaller slots that have less lanes, is either have a 3-sided slot where the back side is just open, or they just put in a connector, a slot that will fit a 16-lane card, but only wired for 4. So you have to be careful and read your motherboard manual to see what your slots are capable, what the wiring is for the slot, what it can negotiate to. And then to make things even more complex, some PCI lanes go directly to the CPU, and some PCI lanes go to the chipset. And then from the chipset, which acts as the hub, it then goes to the CPU. And generally, there's 4 PCIe lanes between a chipset and the CPU. if it's going directly to the CPU, you may get all the way up to 16 lanes. And those 16 lane slots that go directly to the CPU are generally designed for video cards, gamers' video cards. Now, PCI has gone through generations. I think it's up to generation 5 that you can get on motherboards. I think they've defined generation 7, I believe. And each generation roughly doubles the speed, the transmission speed of PCI. So the transmission, how much data can be transmitted between a device plugged into a slot depends on the generation of the slot, and it depends on how many lanes. So when your computer boots up, there's a negotiation process that happens between the card and the computer on how many lanes that card's going to use, and then the card stripes the data across the lanes that it's allocated, so the more lanes it has, the faster it can throughput data. Now, the reason I bring this all up is because those cards, PCI cards that will run Snap, are X16 cards. I have them plugged into X4 slots, and they work fine. So they're X16 generation 1 slots. Oops. Generation 1, X16 slots. I have them, and that's true for this card here. I have them plugged into either a Gen 3 or a Gen 4 slot, but it's only X4, and they perform fine. And that's because PCIe is so fast. So, on your motherboard, you will probably only have one X16 slot that goes directly to the CPU. You don't need that for a Snap video card. So you probably don't want to plug your video card into that. In fact, even if you're a gamer, you probably don't need an X16 slot to plug your card in. I've seen reviews where they're saying there's very few video cards, even modern video cards, that can generate enough data to saturate or that you need an X16 slot. What you can use that slot for is adding more SSDs to your system if you need to. So there are adapter cards that you can plug up to 4 SSDs onto the adapter card, and then you can plug that into an X16 slot. But to do that, your system has to be able to bifurcate the slot, and then we're really getting outside of the video stuff. But this one doesn't have a BIOS that'll do it. My Ryzen MSI system does. So if you really like to have lots of hard drive storage, you may want to buy one of those adapter cards, which are like $60, plug more SSDs in them, and then plug them into your X16 slot. Now, there's a couple of bugs or issues I've run into with Snap. And one of them is it seems to love a refresh rate of 70 hertz. And one of my monitors can do 70 hertz and the other one can't do 70 hertz. And so if you have your refresh rate set higher than what your monitor can handle, it won't display anything. And I sometimes have to go through a dance to get Snap to set the refresh rate down. 60 is pretty safe, and have it stay there. And what I end up doing is setting my resolution, going to multi-head, specifying 2 heads, then getting out of it, rebooting, going back, it'll be 70 hertz, it'll be the wrong one. Then I set it back to 1920 by 1080, set it to 60 hertz, reboot, and then it usually comes back at the right refresh rate, and then you can go back and do what you want to. But just be aware that that's an issue. The other bug is a really interesting one, and that is with some applications, and I don't know if the bug is in the IBM Open Class library or if it's in Snap itself, but if you have the edge of the window, the right side of the window get close to the right side of one of the monitors, the bar that divides them, then it loses track of where it is. And you can see this on something like Larson that has a little bubble help or pop-up helps. You'll see the bubble help pop up way over someplace else that's completely unrelated to where the window is. And that's because it gets confused by it. So the way to fix that is to unselect the checkbox in Snap that says center the head, center the window on and you pick a particular head.
So when you install Snap, you get some app that's on the machine you can use to set these things, or?
It's actually, when you install Snap, it's in the screen object for the workplace shell, and there's a tab for multi-head, and then on the multi-head you'll see this checkbox where you can check this on and off. That's also where you select how many displays you have and whether you want it to be above and below or side by side. And you select the base resolution that you're going to use, and then you go back to the regular resolutions and you select the combined resolution. It's a bit of a process, but it's all.
And can you do that stuff where it either mirrors or extends?
Yes.
You can do all that stuff? Huh?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, Lewis was talking about that as it's being convenient if you're trying to do presentations.
Yeah.
And you've got Snap because, in fact, I was planning to do that here, but my second monitor was HDMI, and it didn't like having an HDMI and a VGA together. So, all right, last thing here. So what's the future of CSM?
Thank you. We're not doing content management.
Yes, thank you. Because you kind of need CSM both for, you definitely need it for Snap, and it makes your life better for Panorama because you could select less than 16 million colors. Problem is Intel really wants to get rid of CSM, and they announced a couple different times that they're going to get rid of CSM as of some date. So a month or two ago, I decided to see if they really were getting rid of it, and went and looked on the manuals for a number of different motherboards, Gigabyte, Asus, MSI, and there was one other I forget, to see if CSM was truly gone or not. And I could find no reference of CSM into those motherboard manuals for motherboards that support the current generation of Intel chips. So at some point in time, it's gone away. However, Intel is doing some strange stuff. They just announced about a month ago what they're calling an i5 110, which is actually a 10th generation i5 processor that they've renamed. And if you go and look at 10th generation Intel processors and go look at their motherboards, they support CSM. And you can surprisingly buy brand new 10th generation i5 processors. They're readily available. You can buy brand new 9th generation Intel processors, and they're readily available. AMD announced a couple months ago that they were releasing new SKUs, new CPUs for AM4 sockets. Now, AMD, the socket is AM3, AM4, AM5, and they've been on AM5 sockets for quite a while. a year or two. But they announced a chip with a new SKU that they're selling that's built to run on motherboards for AM4 sockets. So we're in this weird world, and we talked a little bit about this, of the systems are so fast now and have been for so long that even CPU makers are releasing chips, in Intel's case, that are 4 or 5 generations back as new processors. Now, I almost wonder, in Intel's case, I tried to go and find a store where I could buy an i5 110. I couldn't find any. I almost wonder if it's a marketing ploy by Intel to help retailers sell their stock of old i5 10th generation processors, because they obviously have lots of them, because you can go and buy them new. So I'm wondering if they're never intending to actually make these again, and they're just saying this, and then people are saying, hey, I can buy an i5 10th generation processor for $150 cheaper than their list price for this new processor that's the same thing. So I don't know. AMD has not announced that they're getting rid of CSM on their CPUs. But they have announced that they're getting rid of it on their graphics processors. Because graphics processors also can run at either UEFI, it's called GOP, I think it's Graphics Output Protocol, or they can run conventional BIOS or CSM. And AMD announced that from their, I think it's RX 9000 on, they will not support CSM for their graphics processors anymore. But they haven't said anything for their CPUs. So it may be that we are in a world where if you want to buy a brand new, meaning current or latest generation processor with CSM, that you have to get AMD. If you want to go Intel, you may have to go a couple generations back. But honestly, this stuff is so fast now. You can go 3 or 4 generations back on a processor, and it'll probably satisfy most of your needs.
Now, when it's the RX 9000 GPU, is that a discrete graphics chip?
Yes, yes. So
So-
I have no generally the integrated graphics processor, the one that's bundled with the CPU, generally those aren't as powerful as what you can get on discrete cards.
Right.
And so most real gamers, most hardcore gamers, buy separate graphics processors.
But for somebody like me who doesn't do that stuff.
For us that
these
use
are fine.
business graphics.
Yeah.
And so when I bought my Ryzen system, I specifically looked for one that didn't have the GPU in it because I wanted to save a little bit of money, and it was, I could get the 5600 without the graphics processor. I could get Gen 4 PCIe. If it had the graphics processor, I could only get Gen 3 on it. And this is another issue. You may have a motherboard, and this isn't unusual, that has multiple generations of PCIe on the same motherboard. You may have some that have a slot with Gen 3 and a slot with Gen 4. You may have them that have all the same generation, or not the same generation. So, this machine has Snap on it, obviously. Question is, what's the performance of a 20-year-old video card running a Snap processor? And
Hold on to your hat.
well, let's find out here. Now I have a movie that I can play also.
This is, now what is this hardware? A discrete card?
This is a discrete card. This is a ATI Radeon X600.
Okay.
plugged into an X4 Gen 3 slot on this ThinkStation, or whatever it is.
Those usually have one PCI slot in them, or what? Is that the small factor, not the tiny?
This is the small form factor. This has, I think, a real X16 slot, an X4 slot, I think, and it has a slot that looks like it's X16. You can plug an X16 card in it, but it's only wired for X4. So it has three
So
PCI.
it has 3 slots. Wow.
Has 3 slots on it.
Yeah, that's all I have of those
So-
tiny, because they're so great.
Is that fast enough?
Takes up like. I get rid of all my, bigger ones.
Now I could play a video here, a movie of a dance video. That's a pretty cool dance video, and it runs at 60 frames a second, and you'll see it plays pretty well. But there's more things than just pure graphics performance that are involved there. It's I use VLC. You've got all the VLC stuff that's going on there, so it's not really as accurate. But I've been using Snap for years. Its performance, I think, is perfectly adequate. I have no idea what the benchmark, the video benchmark numbers are if you were to run it, and I don't really care, because what really matters is how snappy it appears. Let's see. So you can see it does a pretty good job.
That's a Windows window?
No, it's
No,
actually,
OS2.
An OS2 window.
Okay.
yeah, but I could do
No, just the color scheme looked like an old Windows one.
well, it's a product it's a 16-bit product that was ported over to OS2, so it's probably a 16-bit OS2 application. I think they used mirrors.
Mirrors, yeah.
I think they used mirrors to do that. But questions?
So my understanding, I just want to make sure, make some notes, but it sounds like Snap requires the CSM?
Yes.
Okay, so.
You can boot into UEFI, but you have to have CSM enabled for it to work.
So you would install first under UFI, and then go back and turn on the CSM?
Well, that's a good question. I used to think that.
Okay,
If you have a video card that does not support GOP, which is the UEFI version of graphics commands,
right,
then you won't see anything when you boot your machine up.
okay,
It goes blank. And these older cards that support Snap, none of them support GOP.
okay,
So if you try and boot it without CSM turned on, one of two things will happen. You'll see nothing on your machine,
right,
or on my MSI motherboard, it automatically switches to CSM when it detects that the video card does not support GOP.
okay,
I have read of people that had a video card that they turned off CSM and then they couldn't see anything on their machine, including the video, to their BIOS to go and change it back
Right.
to that. They had to reset the BIOS to get back to a point
So-
where they could.
I guess the scenario that I'm getting at, I like the card, the Radeon card, I'm gonna go find one. But my question is, I have a current generation Intel processor with a gigabyte motherboard, 16 gig of RAM. I mean, it's a new system. It's a build, something we would build for a customer, okay? How do I have to install ARCA with CSM and avoid UFI?
Do you have a graphics processor on that chip?
No.
Okay, so you can set your BIOS, your firmware,
Mhm.
to enable CSM.
Okay,
Then you can plug in your Radeon, your 20-year-old Radeon
yep, mhm,
card,
yep.
and boot it, and it will probably install correctly.
But will it install in UFI mode, or it's gonna install in CSM?
It will, you can,
There's a problem here. UEFI and CSM are, as far as in the BIOS, are not mutually exclusive. You can have UEFI with CSM enabled, at least in most.
or you could have
Okay.
UEFI without CSM enabled. So you probably want to set your UEFI,
So we need to enable CSM,
enable CSM,
which is not the default in that,
which
on
is,
that one.
which
So,
is not
okay.
the default.
Okay,
And,
there's
and
no-
you may not be able to make those changes to your BIOS with the card in it, because if it's not already set for CSM and you put the card in, and your machine
It'll
won't
go
automatically
black.
set it to CSM, it'll go black.
That's, yeah. so
Now, what
that
I had to
was-
do
yeah,
was
okay.
I bought another video card that supported
Yeah, we got-
GOP, I plugged that in, I did the install, I pulled it out, I put the Radeon in.
We got 30 video cards in the box, there's something there that's gonna work.
You'll probably be fine. Now, remember, you can boot UEFI, you can boot UEFI with CSM,
Yep,
or sometimes you can boot just pure legacy.
Right.
yes.
You'll get some interesting behavior with the, at least with the X600 Radeon card, if you do a UEFI boot, even with CSM, when it's switching into presentation mode, your screen does all these weird things.
Yep.
It does these weird triangles and stuff like this, and it'll do that for 5 to 10 seconds, and then the desktop will come up.
Okay,
If you're not booting UEFI, if you're booting pure CSM, you'll be fine, everything will run great.
okay.
And if you are booting UEFI with CSM, you'll be fine once you get into Presentation Manager too.
Okay. I'm looking forward at, like, okay, if we're gonna really put this through the treadmill and try it out on a variety of different machines, I want something representative of how we would build a new customer machine.
Yeah.
And make it run.
I would put a newer video card that supports GOP in. I would get your BIOS settings, your firmware settings all set up the way you want to.
Okay,
I would have it running on Panorama.
for dual monitoring.
Then I would put in the Radeon card. I would install Snap.
I'm looking at dual monitor, I'm
Yes.
sorry, I should have said that,
Yeah.
specifically dual monitor.
Yeah, but I would still go through a GOP install. I would put Panorama on it. I would make sure that everything was running. Then I would I would actually install Snap, and then I would put in the Radeon card,
Oh, okay,
and then boot again.
so handle it like an accessory add-on rather than a build, okay.
Yeah.
No, that's,
I think that's the safest. You could probably skip a couple steps if you're really careful.
okay.
Uh,
So it wouldn't be a radical departure from our own workflows now, so.
Probably not.
How do you install Snap after you, in that scenario? Is there something in the install
It's
folder?
it's on the Arkanoa CD.
It's on the ISO.
Yeah, it's on the ISO.
So you
It's
boot
under.
the ISO and
You don't have to boot it at all. What you do is you mount the ISO
Yeah.
and you go to CID server
Snap.
snap.
okay.
Snap?
Yeah.
Snap.
What I do is I
Sounds like-
copy.
I don't know if we have instructions to do that in the wiki. David's not
If you
And-
run,
Ticket.
if,
here. There's a setup.
there's a setup, and if you run the setup with no parameters, it'll tell you what
What it needs to be, yeah.
options,
Right.
what parameters you need to give it. I would copy the Snap subdirectory and the Panorama subdirectory off of the ISO onto your hard drive someplace, so it's readily available, so you don't have to plug the thing in and out. And that way you can switch back and forth, because you can run Panorama with the Radian cards, and that'll work. Won't do a monitor, but
What's with Snap? Because that card that environment was built so it's largely data-driven, like you do a new configuration file or something? It doesn't work that way? You gotta
No, yeah.
rebuild the thing for each
Yeah.
card? Or?
it's automatic.
Well, for all the cards that are already in there,
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
you don't have to do anything besides put a new card in.
Understood, but
But if you wanna build a new one, so if you wanna say, oh, I've got this new card that.
you wanna add a new
Yeah,
card.
that is an entire process.
You want to say, hey, I would want Snap to be supported on a Radeon X 550. for
Like a
instance.
modern
You
car.
turn to the guy that's in front of you.
Snap is essentially, Snap was designed as a device driver interface. And theoretically, you could do other things with Snap. You could do network drivers with the Snap framework. What you need is the component, the Snap component, that is able to talk to that hardware. So there is an ATI Snap component that is built when we compile Snap graphics. There is an ATI driver, which is a Snap-specific driver that knows how to address an ATI X300, an ATI X600 card, et cetera, et cetera.
One driver that talks to
One
multiple
driver,
cards.
no, there's one driver for the X300, there's one driver for the X600. Some of them can access multiple cards, but in general, they are card-specific, chip-specific drivers. That is how we're able to turn on the specific features of that chip. So for instance, if you have a chip that is capable of doing multi-head, that's built into that driver that Snap then loads as part of it. You know, it will detect, Snap will detect what video hardware you have and select the appropriate driver that's been compiled into it to address that hardware and provide you with the features specific to that video card.
So does it query the little sub-driver for the capabilities of the graphics card? So that it knows what it can present to you?
In
as
essence,
options?
yes.
Is that right?
Yeah.
And
It
you-
identifies the video card and it knows that if that's the video card you have, that's what it ought to be able to do.
Mhm.
And it enables those features in the Snap interface.
So if you knew how to do this stuff, you could get the source code for Snap, take an example of one that does work,
Yes,
read the documents from ATI or from AMD for how a newer chip works,
yes,
add the functionality.
yes.
Put it on, and just
Yes.
build that, or do you have to build
Drop
the
it
whole
in,
thing?
then you need to rebuild Snap entirely with adding that new driver into the tree.
Oh, and is that just the tree that has the names of the drivers, or is it?
Oh, that tree has a lot of code in it.
So,
A lot of code in it.
But conceptually, it sounds like it's kind of a plug-in thing?
All of the hardware drivers in Snap are in subdirectories in the Snap source tree. Each subdirectory there's a subdirectory for each one of those, you know, ATI, the X300, the X600, and whatever the other drivers are. I mean, those are the main ones that we fiddle around with. But Snap supports how many? 30 cards or something?
More than
30
that.
chips?
Mhm.
More than that?
Yeah.
30 separate chips? More than 30 separate chips?
Well, no, separate cards, but, yeah. I'm not-
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
it's a
the
lot.
chips. I need to look at the tree again to see.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I have the tree on here. But you just add that new chip into that section of Snap
Mhm.
and make the other changes necessary so that Snap will, the build process will pick that up
Mhm.
and compile that one in, and then you compile a new Snap build that supports that.
And if you,
Hardware.
ATI documents their share, they used to, right?
ATI is pretty good about that. I don't know if AMD has followed that.
Continued that?
Yeah.
And what about Intel? Do they dock?
Intel is pretty good.
And does Snap support some Intel?
Yes.
graphics?
Snap supports some Intel.
Some
The
very
one that is
old.
the absolute dog about
NVIDIA.
providing stuff is NVIDIA.
One of the things I forgot to mention is, at least more than just passing, is your video cards are gonna have more memory than you really need
Uh-huh.
to use. And what you wanna do is limit the amount of video memory that Snap uses, because otherwise it's gonna map that into, I think it's your virtual address space, and maybe into your real memory. But, so, figure what resolution that you want, what the color depth is, calculate out what that size is, and then set the video memory for Snap, either that size or twice that size if you wanna allocate extra space for a buffer. Otherwise, if you have a video card that has 256 megabytes on the card, it's gonna consume 256 megabytes of space on your
1/16th of
machine,
your total
even though it
available
really
memory.
doesn't need that.
Yeah, okay.
So, and it's the GA option, I think, VidMem, and you set it to whatever.
Hmm.
That's in the Snap app.
And I think 17 megabytes is large enough for
I think
3840 by 21 by.
I think Cytex said that the largest you'd ever need is 32 meg.
Yeah, so.
Now, this is a ThinkPad with an AMD chip in it with presumably the graphics is on the chip. That potentially could work with this stuff or not? Does it have to be a discrete graphics chip or?
It has to be a chip that's supported by,
I mean, if you
Snap.
were building a new driver for Snap,
Right,
if you have the specs for that
for that onboard
video,
graphics.
onboard video, yeah, you could.
You could do that?
Yes.
Huh, interesting.
In fact, that is sort of the plan with McCall, is that one day,
With who?
McCall Nachesic, who used to work at SciTech,
Mhm.
that one day McCall may build us an Intel HD Snap driver
Uh-huh.
to add into our Snap tree
And that would be laptops like this that has.
that has Intel HD graphics.
And then you potentially could get dual monitor, for example?
Yep, dual monitor, and you could do not just dual monitor, but you could switch. Like I was able to cycle through LCD, both, or just
Uh-huh.
external.
Oh, that's cool.
So any of those hardware functions would be in that driver specific to that video chip.
So we need to take him out to dinner or what?
I probably, you know, he collects bits of computer antiquity, so I need to send him more bits of computer antiquity.
You
What do
mean
you
old,
need?
old,
What-
Old
what-
software and old
Like what?
hardware.
What would get you?
Old
what
hardware.
would get you-
Well, I sent him, I had some NFR copies of Novell Unixware in sealed boxes, I
Oh,
sent him.
sealed, I don't know anything sealed like that.
But he doesn't need
Saran wrap.
it sealed necessarily. I also
I
sent
mean, I have
him,
thousands of things. If he has a particular interest in something, let me know.
all right, I'll ask him.
Because
I'll
I
ask
have, yeah.
we got a collection of stuff that was donated to us, donated to me for Warpstock essentially. And in that collection of stuff was IBM, what was it? It was an IBM speech card.
Oh, I've got a copy of voice type.
Voice
with
type.
the card, with the card in the box.
With the card in the box.
I got that sealed.
Well, he got the used one that we have.
Oh,
This
And
is like
the
bartering
medical
for
one.
Manhattan.
really? See, I don't have the medical
It
library.
was a doctor who
Okay.
donated it to us, and
I've
he
been
was
afraid
big
to
into
open it because it
OS2.
looks so nice. They're still sealed.
Yeah, I know. And so I sent that over to him, and I'll ask him if he's looking for something in particular,
Yeah. True.
and let you know.
Yeah.
You know,
And I need to, it's time that I give him another nudge anyway.
Is he retired?
No, he's
He's
a
work-
young
his
fellow, about
work.
Andy's age.
He has a regular job. That young.
You know, a bit of trivia, the reason why we have Open Wacom compiler is because of Scitech.
Yeah,
They were using Wacom because it's a cross compiler.
Yeah, that's what he uses.
And they wanted to develop in DOS because it reboots faster.
Yep, sure
And you're
does.
crashing the machine a lot when you're doing device driver development. But when Sybase bought Wacom, they discontinued the compiler. And so the head of Scitech persuaded them to release the Wacom C and C++ compiler as open source. And he was persuasive enough, and he needed that to continue, you know, his development for the company. So we
You've been
have
using
them to thank
Wacom
for that.
What, 20 years or something?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
No,
Thank you, guys.
I was, oh, thank you.
yeah.